Hello, curious folk. For those that do not know me, my name is Leah, and I'm a psychologist specializing in sexuality and relationships, and I work with adults. I am so keen to welcome you on this webinar with a colleague of mine that you'll meet in a little bit. But I must acknowledge the topic is not easy. It's about how to deal with and recover and heal from sexual trauma. But let's get clear. When we talk about sexual trauma, that could happen in many ways. It doesn't just happen in dark alleys, it happens in relationships too, between loving, committed partners that mean no bad. Sometimes communication fails, sometimes a person freezes, sometimes we just misunderstand what we are to do or how we are to act and what happened. It's complicated. I'm no expert in helping people deal with sexual trauma, and that's why I invited my colleague. The webinar is full of interesting insights that would help you understand how you can begin to make sense of your trauma and what is happening in your body and how you can address it. Furthermore, I must say this webinar, it may seem very targeted to women, but I believe that men can watch it and learn and heal themselves too. What's more, this webinar may be useful for men who want to help their partners to overcome barriers, to overcome trauma, to deal with what's happening with them right now. Hence, I would say if you're interested in learning about trauma and how one can start the journey of healing, this one is for you. Whether it's your own journey or your partner's journey or your friend's journey, it doesn't really matter. The insights will be useful, and I encourage you to apply what you can and what seems right for you. Furthermore, I would say that my colleague is very knowledgeable and amazing, and she opened her heart in that webinar, and I hope that you would appreciate this, and if you need support in that area, you would reach out to her. But if you want to just learn about healthy relationships and build skills around that and how to enrich and make your sex life more interesting and enrich your repertoire in bed, then reach out to me. Let's chat and we can book a free introductory call that would help you get on the journey of learning, growth, and fulfilling intimate relationships. Okay, without further ado, I hope you enjoyed this one. This is it. I look forward to exploring the deep topic and getting as much value to you guys as possible. Veronica, it's on to you.
Oh, thank you, Leah. It's just wonderful to be here with you and with all of you courageous souls that showed up today and those of you who are going to show up at a later time. Just applaud you for being here. I know this is a gnarly topic, but I bring a lot of joy, a lot of hope, and a lot of inspiration to it. And that's probably, in my experience, I've been on this journey for a few decades. It's kind of uncommon to juxtapose joy and celebration when we're talking about something as painful and often debilitating as sexual assault. Before we dive into that, though, let me just say a few things about myself. I am an incest survivor. I'm also a rape survivor, and I have been in recovery for over 30 years. I've pursued a lot of different modalities, and helping other people recover is really important to me. I'm certified as a sexologist through the American College of Sexologists, and I'm also certified through anger management. Now, it might seem a little odd that I've combined sex and anger, but actually my profession is as a relationship coach, so I'm working with couples all the time, and sex and anger are two very troublesome spots for most couples.
Mhm.
So I'm going to share with you some of my healing journey, and I'm also going to share with you what has worked for my clients and some of the things that I know and I'm learning as I'm researching my second book. My second book is called Love, Lust, and Romance in the Wake of #MeToo. Now, the reason that I'm looking at love is because, believe it or not, 1/3 of married women are experiencing, well, what the research terms as sexual assault, but I would imagine those wives probably think of it as consent violations from their husbands. Now, I'm not assuming that everybody here is heterosexual or cisgender or paired monogamously or even married, but it's an interesting statistic because it really highlights the denial that we have when it comes to issues of consent violations in our intimate, loving connections. And
Mhm.
I really want to focus on that because that's where most of the damage is actually taking place. It's not taking place in the streets when you're walking down the street. Yes, there is stranger rape. Yes, there are serial rapists. I have had the misfortune of encountering a serial rapist. So I'm not discounting that, but I really wanted to highlight today how consent violations and sexual assault go under the radar in our personal relationships, and we may not even know that we're traumatized. And some of the things you can look for actually are reduced libido, reduced sexual desire, and disassociation during some types of sex or touch. So disassociation looks like you're maybe thinking about the grocery list, or did you put the kids to bed, or something on your to-do list. It can also look like you're just staring at the ceiling, or you momentarily lose track of time. It happens in different ways for different people and in different circumstances. But I'm just wanting to put that on everybody's radar today, so we build a big container for what it looks like to be a sexual assault survivor. And I also want to say that we all struggle with consent issues. So it is not something that is necessarily just about what men do to women. There's actually I have male clients who have had their consent violated by their female partners.
And
So
we
we
don't talk about this enough.
No, we do not. We don't hardly talk about it at all. And it's really hard for people to surface that stuff. But because I'm a sexologist, I'm working to enhance people's sex lives, and bumping up against the consent violations and the toleration of unwanted touch. That this becomes kind of a normalized in our relationships and certainly in our culture. So let me back up just a little bit and talk about healing the shame and the fear. I want to tell you something. When I was first coming out of denial about being an incest and rape survivor, it was really hard for me to even connect with my emotions. I felt disassociated from them. It felt like something that happened to somebody else, or it was way over there. And mostly I held it as no big deal. And then I got into therapy. At the time, there was CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And I just want to highlight that's not actually the best way to work with trauma.
Mm.
If any of you are familiar with Vander Kolk's book called The Body Keeps the Score, it was a New York Times bestseller for about 5 years. It's an awesome book. It's got great research in it about what actually does heal trauma. And it's a little bit surprising, actually. One of the things at the top of the list is yoga. Now, why would yoga work? Because it's stretching the tissues while you're breathing. And believe it or not, the military in the United States, where I'm based, is using yoga to treat post-traumatic stress disorder in soldiers returning from war. So this is science-based, and it's really a great way to start getting back into your body. Because when we tolerate unwanted touch, or we've been sexually assaulted, and especially if there was any kind of child sexual abuse, there's so much of a reflex and just a neural pathway that wants to take us out of our body so that we're not present. And that's because the body does keep the score and the trauma is in the tissues. So it's not uncommon for somebody who's working through yoga with the intention of healing trauma to have some very intense emotions come up. They might cry, and it's okay. It's really okay. So we have to get past our fear of feeling our emotions. And one of the other things that is really helpful in working through trauma is support groups. Now, it's great to have a confidant, a best friend. It's great to have a therapist. Highly, highly recommend that in the beginning stages of recovery, obviously. But being in a group of other survivors and you get to hear their stories and you identify with each other and you start to realize that even if the circumstances of your um, abuse were different, even drastically different, that you share a common emotional uh, tableau, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Can
So
I
that, yeah.
can I use the opportunity to just summarize, because everything that you're saying is so vital, and the difficulty with these webinars that we do, they're so packed with goodness that people feel overwhelmed and they're like, so what am I supposed to do next?
Right.
And that's an issue, and I just want to say thank you and highlight two of the big things that I would also massively underline from what you've said is yoga, the way to connect with your body.
Yes.
Maybe it's not for you for one reason or another, but any form of movement that gets you into feeling your body is good. It's a good step. If you're making notes, write it down. A way to connect with your body is a way forward.
Yes, and while we're talking about that, some people can't do the stretches, and
Yeah,
so
that's why I said any form
well,
of way of connecting.
what I want to highlight is
Mm.
a form of yoga called Kundalini yoga, because one thing that's really really important is to get connected to our breath. Most of us who were assaulted or abused held our breath in some way. We weren't actually breathing. Or we might have been hyperventilating, but we weren't breathing deep and soulful and really connecting with our emotions. Kundalini yoga is amazing. You can just sit in any position. You could sit in a chair. You don't have to be limber. You don't have to be able bodied. You don't have to be anything except able to breathe. So I just really want to say that having those kind of practices, and if you don't like Kundalini, find a yogic pranayam and mudra that works for you so that you can help yourself go kind of quiet the monkey brain, go into the breath, and really allow your emotions to come up. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And the other thing was that I would highlight again is using the professional help of people that know how to guide you through recovery. And therapists absolutely go for that, but also the support of others in support groups and leaning onto leaning onto each other emotionally when you have some common language, some common understanding of the experience. Otherwise, you're very isolated. And even if you're working through it with a therapist, if you don't know whether they've been through this or they wouldn't share or whatever, you're still thinking you don't get it. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. And that is damaging in itself. That's why one of the reasons why I remove myself from the line of therapy is because they want you to be a blank slate, to be nothing. And I'm like, the way we connect and relate to each other is through sharing, to talking, through being there as real human beings, not a white wall, you know? So that's why another thing is Veronica being very honest and open that she's been through this. She knows.
Yes,
Invaluable.
Leah, that's a really good point because one of the gifts that I give my clients is the fact that I'm there with them. I'm not above them or apart from them. And I use the things that I have recovered from to actually help my clients. It inspires them because they're like, well, she did it, so maybe I can too.
Yes.
And that identification is crucial. I also want to point out that there's two forms of therapy that the research has proven is very, very powerful in working with PTSD and trauma. And the first one is EMDR. EMDR is kind of a bilateral stimulation. Sometimes they use eye movement. Sometimes they're stimulating you with a little thing that vibrates first in one hand and then the other. And you can even do this yourself. And what this does is it helps the brain start to make connections. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for a large percentage of trauma survivors. And for the people that it does work for, it's really effective. And another form of therapy, which is brand new, but has a proven track record, it is absolutely documented in Vander Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. It was founded by Richard Schwartz, and it's called IFS, which stands for Internal Family Systems. And I've done both of these and gotten so much help. I have complex trauma, so I've really gone for the powerful therapeutic models. So I just want to put that out there and say those two, IFS, Internal Family Systems, and EMDR, are very effective in helping to basically quiet your nervous system so that you can start processing what happened and move beyond it, because that is our goal here. We want to move beyond it and have a happy, joyous, free life. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to summarize that before I move on, Leah. I'm pausing so that you can step in if
Yeah,
you like.
I would just highlight there are many modalities of therapy, and obviously you need to find what's right, but there are some that are associated more with specific conditions. And CBT, for instance, which is really pushed onto people in Britain with the National Health Service, is not suitable. That's why I would encourage people to go out and seek support privately, because they're not going to get the appropriate help via the NHS here, for instance. But the other most important thing about therapy that I would highlight is that you click with your therapist and that you can really connect with them, because this is the first thing that needs to be there before any therapy approach, any modality, anything like this. If you cannot connect with them, if you link them to someone that is annoying or was the person that caused you trauma or something, you're not going to open up, you're not going to get anywhere. So highly recommend find someone that you really can link up with emotionally. And the model, yes, pursue people with these modalities in terms of skill, but make sure you get along with them. Don't go for the most expensive, the best, bright, blah blah blah, and then you can't stand them because they're so up their ass, Yeah, it's true though. I've seen people do that. They're like, well, I went to the best therapist, and I'm like, did you like them? No, bunch of idiots. And I'm like, what kind of work were you supposed to do with someone that you did not open up with?
Yeah.
So
You want to be very, very honest with your therapist, otherwise you're wasting your time and your money too. So it
absolutely.
absolutely has to be somebody you trust.
Yeah, yeah. Please continue. I'm I'm gonna
Yes.
ask questions here and there, and just to encourage once more, people do ask questions on the chat. This is your opportunity to speak to someone directly and ask away anything.
Please
Take
do.
advantage.
I really welcome your questions and also your comments, please. I want to talk a little bit about anger and rage, because for most survivors of sexual assault, it was a survival mechanism not to step into the anger and the rage. So let me explain just a little bit about the amygdala, also known as the reptilian brain. It's a primal part of the brain in a human. It kind of sits at the stem and the base of the brain. That kicks in to protect us. And so most people say it has three functions: fight, flight, or freeze. But there's actually a fourth one, which is called fawning. Fawning really means that you are doing your best to flatter, compliment, and get along with the person who's harmed you. And you see this a lot in people who have been repeatedly abused by somebody. So this especially, the fawning thing especially kicks in long-term relationships where somebody is frightened of their partner, but they're still living with them. And so they may try to smooth things over. And I heard a client the other day say, avoid the beast. It's so sad, actually, to be sleeping with somebody that you consider to have this really dark, evil side that comes out and harms you. But one of the coping mechanisms for that is fawning. And if you are in a position where you can't get away, it makes perfect sense. I fawned to the serial rapist that I was imprisoned by for a couple hours. I complimented him, I was sweet to him. He finally let me go. And you know something? I'm glad that I did that because he raped an 18-year-old girl about 2 weeks later and he stabbed her in the face because she fought back. There are times to fight back. I'm trained in self-defense. And but I just believe in choice without the shaming. So if your gut tells you you should fawn, fawn. If you need to disassociate from what's happening to you so that you can survive it, then that's what that mechanism is there for. But here's what happens, especially when this happens to us in a way that we're not conscious about it, we don't get help for it, or maybe it happened in our childhood. We start having a habit of not really having the ability to express our boundaries and assert our truth. And it really does start with your anger. So I'm an anger management coach. I don't teach people how to act out and do bad things with their anger. I teach them how to have their anger and hold their rage as something that's sacred. Why I call it sacred, especially for us survivors, is because it's the one thing that'll let you know sometimes. Sometimes it's the only thing that'll let you know that your boundaries are being violated, that this isn't working for you, that harm is being perpetrated against you. Because we can become so acclimated to it and so numb to it, we don't even realize. So, your rage is sacred if it's taking place inside you and you are tuning into it and you're asking it what it's trying to tell you. And you're using it as information to create boundaries and to navigate your life in a powerful way. It's not sacred rage if you destroy property, threaten people's well-being, harm somebody physically, unless, of course, you did that to save your life. I would totally endorse that. But if it's in a relationship, you don't want to act out your anger. What you want to do is use it for fuel to help fire change in you so that you will stop tolerating things that don't work for you anymore. So I would love to hear you summarize that, Leah, because that's kind of a big piece and it's a little bit out of the norm culturally. So I just want to see what you actually heard.
How I would stay on the key, which is your anger has purpose.
Yeah.
And before that, it doesn't matter how you reacted to a violation. It was there to save you, to safeguard you, to keep you sane in that moment. So some people freeze, some people flop, some people want to run, some people want to fight, and all of that is fine. And if you want to flatter them so you get out, so they think that you're so gullible you didn't even realize what happened to you and that they can get away with it, whatever it was, you do what you need to do to survive and you shouldn't punish yourself for it. And anger, you can use it for your own understanding, for your own change. And it's healthy, especially women are told they shouldn't be angry, they shouldn't show anything that is anything but being a lady, you know? And that is so damaging. And I would say I I would endorse anger being poured out when necessary, when there is nothing to do with it but destroy if necessary. Anger has a destructive, I don't know, force because that's its purpose. You know, sometimes it needs to destroy, in my opinion. It needs to be given freedom. And again, like Veronica said, I'm not saying go and destroy property and kill people unnecessarily, but don't deny yourself that feeling of anger because it's yours and you're entitled to it. And it can guide you to understand your boundaries
Yeah, I
and
like to think
maintain
of
them.
anger as a powerful wind. And I like to kind of envision, like if I was at sea and I had a sailboat and there was a powerful wind, I could trim that sail just right so that it would catch the wind and take my sailboat a long ways. And that would be a really powerful move. Or I could be inept with the sail and not know what I'm doing, and then the wind is just going to tear it apart. So, whatever you do with your anger, you want to make sure that it's something that's building your life in a constructive fashion. Um, there's also grief that's going to come up, and sometimes it's hiding behind the anger. Not always. Anger is not always a secondary emotion. Sometimes we're just angry. But behind the anger about being violated is usually the grief. And I want to tell you something. When I was in the early stages of my recovery, I spent entire days in the fetal position with the light on, by the way, because I was so afraid, even though my father was hundreds of miles away and I was a full grown woman in her 20s, I still had a fear of him. And so I always had the light on at night while I was sleeping. We have to take care of ourselves, whatever we need. I would crawl under the sheets and I would just cry in the fetal position for hours. And I would journal and I'd write my pain out in a book that I'll never publish. I just wrote it for a year for myself because every night when I went to bed, I'd get nauseous and sick to my stomach. And then when I started to write, the nauseous feelings would go away and then I could go back to sleep. So honor your process. And what it feels like it's never going to end, it will. It will end. It's just that it's all stuffed down in there. So now we got to let it up. We have to let it up and out. And on the other side of that, even while I was still going through this, you know, um, in the fetal position crying at night, something was happening. I was starting to have two experiences that were just mind blowing for me, and nobody told me to expect this. One was that I'd be watching some show that I'd laughed at before, maybe, but now my laughter went all the way down to my toes. And I was fascinated and thrilled that I was getting access to all my feelings. They were starting to come back. I wasn't frozen anymore. I wasn't numb anymore. I was starting to be able to feel all kinds of things. And that actually went into my orgasmic response as well. So I started having full body orgasms. And for me, not to set a hierarchy here about orgasms, or they're all good, but I love full body orgasms. And that started to happen for me as I started to experience my rage and my grief. So we want to try not to be afraid of how we feel. It's okay. If you can have the feelings that aren't so good, you're going to have some fabulous feelings rebirthing themselves and showing up for you too. So, exercises to heal trauma in the tissues. I have mentioned yoga and I've mentioned EMDR and IFS. I want to also talk about sexological body work. This is not something I'm certified to do, and it may not be something that calls to you. This would be only for a few of you who feel called to it. But if you find a sexological body worker who's certified, um, and be careful about that because you want to find somebody who actually says, yes, I know how to work with trauma in the tissues. And if you've been sexually assaulted, your genital tissues have trauma in them. So, how are we going to get that out? Sexological body work is one way you can allow another human being who's trained and certified to touch your genitals while you cry, while you remember, usually they're definitely not trying to provide you with an orgasmic release or sexual pleasure. What they're trying to do is help the trauma come out of your tissues. Why would you want to do that? because then you will be reclaiming your genitals, your sexual tissues. Um, I keep saying both of those words because I don't, sometimes it might be uh, your rectum and you may not consider that a sexual organ. So wherever you've experienced sexual assault, we want those tissues to be alive and able to produce and communicate pleasure to you. And they can't do that if they're still stuck in the trauma response.
Mhm.
So, because we are all about reclaiming your sexual joy here, I'm recommending that we move the sexual trauma out of your sexual tissues. Sexological bodywork is one way to do it. You may not be at a place where you would trust another human being to touch you there while you were feeling those emotions at all. Perfectly okay. I totally understand that. And that's why I'm going to give you this self-pleasuring exercise you can do all by yourself with nobody else around. And it basically involves you creating, set aside about 30 minutes that is just your sacred private time. And you can, it's nice to put on some music, but I want to encourage you to use music that kind of expands you. So maybe that would be mantra music. Maybe it would be some kind of metaphysical music. Maybe it's classical music. Whatever it is, make sure it's not like romantic music. I got to take a little drink of water here. Sorry. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're going into a place that's expanded and centered around you. So we're not thinking about pair bonding. We're not thinking about porn. We're not thinking about romantic or sexually exciting fantasies. We're actually kind of clearing our mental landscape. And you want to start it off. By the way, it's kind of nice to arouse all your senses. So if you can bring in maybe some sparkling apple cider or water or chocolate covered strawberries, something that could kind of tantalize your tongue, that'd be great. I strongly no mind altering chemicals because the object is we want to get in touch with our feelings, and those have a tendency to numb out our feelings. It might enhance sensuality, but they don't allow us to get in touch with the gnarly stuff. And you can also maybe bring in something that you like the smell of. So whether that would be incense or scented candles, or maybe just some essential oils that you want to rub on yourself. Just like really bring your olfactory senses alive. I'm sure you can tell what we're doing here is we're starting to help you get embodied. And the first thing I want to invite you to do is like set the timer for about 5 minutes. Take your hand, just cup it like this, and cup your genitals and breathe. Again, we're back to the breath. Breathing is a great way to get in touch with emotions. So as you're cupping your genitals, you're going to ask silently or out loud, it's up to you, a question. And it's just like, what do you want me to know? What do you want to tell me? And yes, I am actually asking you to have a conversation with your genitals, but they're going to probably talk to you in the way of thoughts and pictures. You might suddenly find yourself thinking about something that seems kind of weird to you. Like, why would I be thinking about that while I'm touching my genitals? Just go with it. Go with it. Keep a journal beside your bed or wherever you happen to be doing this so that you can take notes if you feel like it. But take the notes afterwards. While you're doing this, you just really want to use it as kind of a meditation. So after the 5 minutes are up, you can start to touch yourself in a sensual, erotic way. But it would be very helpful to set an intention. Like if something came up that was traumatizing, you can actually touch your genitals in a way that would release grief and rage. And you can actually take yourself to the point of orgasm, and that grief and that rage can come out. You would probably make a lot of noise. This is not going to be a quiet thing. So if you have lots of privacy, that's great. But if you don't, I just want to give you this one tip. This is what I give my anger management clients because I want them to get in touch with their rage. You take a little hand towel or washcloth and you twist it up real tight, and then you bite down on it like that, and then scream. Just test it, and you'll notice nobody's calling the police, so it's okay. And as long as your dog's not scared or your cat didn't run and hide, you're good. You can just allow all those feelings to come out. And it could possibly be one of the deepest orgasms you've had in a while if you really let yourself go for this. And it's kind of shocking the first time I tried this. I was so surprised that I could evoke an orgasmic response thinking about things that made me angry and sad. But one of the things that I realized on the other side of this was it was so healing. There was some way in which that orgasm opens up the brain and opens up our soul, opens up our being, so that the stuff that's trapped inside of us really gets to come out, and then we're free of it. And I'm not suggesting you're going to do this once and then you're done, but I am suggesting that trauma is like, it's like layers of it. So we're peeling it off and we're letting it go. And you may find that those layers are deep, and so you have to work with your trauma for a long time. I know for me, I think of it as the proverbial layers of the onion. Every once in a while, another layer comes off the onion and I cry. But on the other side of that, my joy is just immeasurable.
Mm.
So, is anybody, Leah, do you have any questions about this exercise?
No, I think it's a really beautiful exercise, and I know that if you've told me years ago, talk to your body and listen to it, I would have been like, what? What now? But I think that we hold a lot of trauma even from daily experiences with our bodies. Like women, people who have periods, let's be inclusive.
Yeah.
Periods can traumatize you. I have had such traumatizing periods where I have felt like I wish someone can cut this half of me and just chuck it away.
Mm.
And I've learned that actually, if I'm trying to pour more love into my body and respond to it and think and listen, and I'm like, what do I need? I need to lay down. Can I be at work right now? No. And I listen to what my body wants, what my body needs, and I give it to it, and I speak gently to it, and with love, it feels much better. If you even go back to why, when you were a kid and you fall down and someone comes to you and says a nice word, and it's like, you're okay, you'll be okay, and gives you a kiss on the cheek, and it's like, even if it's some grandma that, just saw you fall on your knees and she jumped up and was the first to help you up, it feels like the pain went away. Magical. Magical. Because someone paid attention, someone saw us, someone gave us that little bit of peace and love in that moment of pain and trauma. And
Yes,
yet,
and loving touch, as long as it's safe touch and
yeah,
consensual
yeah,
touch, also releases oxytocin. And
yeah,
it's fascinating because I have a little dog. We've been together now for 13 years, and if she gets hurt, if I go over and comfort her and touch where it got hurt and give her a little kiss on the forehead, it's all better. And if I get hurt, she will come over and she'll lick me, and I feel great. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That
yeah,
just goes to speak that we get to experience our bodies with what we feed it. And if we let go of shame, of pain, of hate, because I know I've spoken to trauma survivors and they say I hate my body, and I hate the way that I have to live with it. And I'm like, your body's not your enemy.
And well, that's a great
Yeah.
point. And one of the things that I almost forgot to include is that it's a two-way communication when you
Mm.
are holding your genitals and asking them what they want to tell you. At some point, after you've listened and really received what your genitals are trying to say to you, you want to be able to make some agreements with your body about how you're its number one advocate and protector, and you're going to take good care of it, and that you believe your body too. Because let's face it, one of the things that happens, and especially if you're abused as a child, but even if you're abused in a relationship or by a stranger, you're going to get told that it was your fault, or that it wasn't so bad, or it didn't happen. And to be able to tell your body, which is a really important part of you, I believe you. I totally believe you.
Mhm.
And also, I'm gonna start listening to you when you have feelings. When you tell me that person doesn't feel safe and this doesn't feel right, and I don't want to be here, and I'm not liking this, I'll listen from now on. I'll not only listen, but I'll respond. I'm going to go, okay, thanks for that information. So we're going to remove ourselves from this particular interaction, or we're going to assert a boundary now so that you'll be safe going forward.
Mm. Do you
Yeah.
know one of the things that some people don't understand is why, especially victims of rape and assault, um, become victims again and again. And they're
Yeah.
like, wow, how can you let this happen to you so many times? I'm like, are you serious? Like, most of the time, people are so disconnected from themselves and their bodies, they can't listen. They are not in touch with what is happening for them. And sadly, that may result into more trauma and more people taking advantage of them.
It does. Well, it can. Certainly for me, I felt like when I left my father's home, I just kind of had incest survivor tattooed across my forehead because I was raped my second year of college. And it's very interesting. I am not convinced that the boy who raped me knows that he raped me. I think he was a jerk, and I think he was probably pushing boundaries with lots of girls. And who knows? Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm giving him more credit than he deserves. Maybe he was incarcerated at some point for rape. I don't know. I lost track of him intentionally. But I do know this: I never fought back or said no. What he said, just like 3 words, he said, "Don't worry, I won't." And I didn't hear anything after that because that's what my father used to say: "Don't worry, I won't." So I went catatonic. I went out of my body. I wasn't there anymore. And he just basically used me like a human toilet. It was really humiliating. And then sent me away, like, "I'm done with you now, so you can leave." Um, so it was a horrible experience. And I for a long time, I thought, oh, I did that to myself. It's my fault. I shouldn't have been attracted to him. I shouldn't have gone to his room. I shouldn't have been kissing him. And so many,
Self-blame.
so many, so many of us have been in similar situations. What I now know is that one of the phrase responses is called, it's kind of an accelerated, advanced form of phrase response. We all need to know about this. It's called tonic immobility. Tonic immobility is the inability to move or speak. And believe it or not, there have been levels of tonic immobility in about 97% of all rape cases that are reported and documented. So this is happening a lot. And when we start questioning ourselves, or we're questioned by other people about, well, did you say no? Did you fight back? It's not in line with the research, the physiology of the human body. What does the body do when it is threatened, particularly when it is raped? It
Mm.
goes immobile. It freezes to a point where you can't speak. So, knowing that, we want to be able to release ourselves from the shame and the guilt and the self-blame. But we also want to be able to find ways to protect ourselves going forward. And this is where we talk about reclaiming our sexual sovereignty. One of the ways that I've done this is I find my triggers. Oh, any man who says to me, "Don't worry, I won't," I will get triggered. How do I work with that trigger? How do I heal it? I first have to become conscious of it. And then I have to start working around it in therapy. In my case, I took a self-defense class that was really confrontive. There's like 16 women on the side cheering me on as that particular rape was reenacted with an expert self-defense teacher. And he's fully padded. It was called model mugging. And he said the exact same words, "Don't worry, I won't." And I froze and I couldn't even hear anymore. And these women are right there and they're yelling my name and cheering me on. And it sounds like they're 30 miles away. I can barely hear them. And they keep chanting, "You can do this, you can do this, you got it, you got it." And I can't move, I can't hear even. I am so gone, I'm so far removed. Gradually, their voices get louder, their voices get louder. And all of a sudden, I'm standing up and the model mugger is on the floor. Because I had worked on this for months, I've been going through this training, but it was still very difficult in that moment where we reenacted the rape. We've got to be patient with ourselves, gentle with ourselves, but it's worth it to also be persistent and to keep finding what's going to work for you to get past those triggers so that somebody can't completely take control of your body just by saying a few words or doing a particular action. And so that's one thing I want to share. Also, taking your sexual sovereignty. First of all, let's like define that word. What does it mean? Sovereignty means this is like you rule this. This is your kingdom. So, if you have been assaulted or incested or had consent violations, there's ways in which somebody has said, "I own your body. I own your sex." And it gets co-opted in so many ways. And even if you haven't been assaulted, there's so many ways our sexuality gets co-opted by the morals police, by laws that try to tell us who we can love, who we can't love, how we can love, how we can't love. How do you reclaim all that and say, "This is mine. This is mine. You can't take this away from me"? I think one thing that really helps me is knowing a little bit about where sex begins, where we become sexual beings, so that I can kind of understand the origins of my sexuality. So here's a little known fact. There is research documenting fetuses of both genders, and that isn't to say that there aren't intersex people, but they only have documented male and female, masturbating in the womb to the point of orgasm. And I just think that is such a beautiful affirmation of how central and sacred our sexuality is. Because I guarantee you, the little fetus wasn't thinking about porn or getting some romantic movie or even creating another baby. There was something else going on there. And, that's up for discussion. You can have your own interpretation of that. I'm just presenting the scientific facts. But I will tell you how I look at it. I look at it as our sexuality is actually part of our spirituality. That it's so beautiful. If we take away all the ways that it's been co-opted and controlled and defined and perverted, and we just look at our core, who we are as sexual beings. And it's helpful to go back to that innocent place, to reconnect with it, and really find your joy in just experiencing delight and pleasure. And to know that that's actually your birthright. That's yours. Nobody can take that away from you. So, this is one of the ways we move into sexual empowerment and sensual empowerment. It also really helps to study history. And that may not be your thing, but let me say a few things about the history. if you go back far enough, the sexuality of the human being was really considered to be sacred. You think about it. Here's women with life coming from their wombs, and you go back far enough and they weren't quite sure why it was happening or how it was happening. And it was awesome and it was amazing. And then the women's breast gave those babies nourishment. And so the ancient temples are oftentimes constructed to worship female bodies. And, if you do have body shame, I'd love to introduce you, if you haven't heard of it already, to the goddess of Wallendorf. The goddess of Wallendorf is one of the first human figurines ever created. And she's got folds of opulent fat and big pendulous breasts and a huge pregnant belly and awesome, powerful thighs. And she's just screaming feminine power and creative force. And I don't want to leave the men out of this. So there are also ancient figurines worshiping penises. And if you go to the ancient temples in India, all the outside walls are just covered with sexual depictions. So what does that tell you about the ways we've had our sex kind of put off in a shameful dark corner where we're not able to look at it in the bright sunlight and really celebrate it and celebrate ourselves for being sexual beings? So I'm going to pause again, Leah, to see. It's a lot. I know it's a lot.
You said so much, there's no way for me to even begin to summarize, and we're at the final stretch anyway. Um, but I think that the highlights that we need to be taking is definitely around allowing ourselves to have a different experience with our bodies, to move into recovery, to move into feeling blessed with who you are and with your sexuality. One of the things that people are very surprised when I quote that research about babies masturbating when they're still in uterus is people go like, wow, really?
Yeah.
And I'm like, babies just find what feels good and they go for it because it's theirs to go for it.
Yeah.
And it's society, it's other people, it's parents, it's stigma, it's shame that teaches kids how to dissociate from their wants and needs, how to shut up and listen, how to be super polite and never say the wrong thing, how to please other people sexually, emotionally, psychologically, in any possible way, but forget about who they are. It's scary the way many people are brought up. And
Yeah,
we have so much unlearning to do, and even more so after trauma.
and one of the things that's so important, and this, I have a free gift that goes with this, so I just want to make sure, though, that we talk about it a little bit before I offer that free gift, and that's healthy boundaries.
Mm,
So we don't have assertion skills that are specific to intimate connections and intimate situations. We have some models of consent that are coming out of academia, which I'm not disputing those or saying that they don't have value, but it's always about the negotiation up front, like what do you want to do? And it is a bunch of talking, kind of before sex. And for some people that, I don't know, that kind of interrupts the flow and the mood. So, and also you can have an understanding about consent and then not have the language to speak about your consent during sex. So I want to introduce the idea that, first of all, it's great to get in touch with what you want and don't want, and to give yourself permission to change your mind. We're moving targets. We don't come here with just one sexual template. We grow, we change, our desires change and shift. So it's important to just constantly be checking in with yourself and see what's true for you about touch and sex and connection with others. And then to be able to communicate that is awesome and amazing. But learning to actually be able to talk about what's going on for you during sex, this is something I specialize in, teaching couples in particular how to stop sex, even during the middle of sexual intercourse. It's like this big taboo, like, well, we started it, so we have to finish it. And I'm like, no, you don't. And you better not. If you get triggered during sex that you consented for, stop it, take a time out. Don't make anybody bad or wrong, not you, not your partner. Just say, hey, I'm having a thing right now. And I'm noticing that I'm checking out. I'm leaving my body. I'm getting some nasty pictures about an uncle, whatever's going on for you. I need to actually be held and cry, or maybe I need to take a walk. I'll come back in a minute. Whatever you need in that moment, you really want to honor that. So sexual freedom needs healthy boundaries. That's what keeps us safe and connected to ourselves and to each other. And if your partner can't tolerate interrupting in the middle of sex in order to be there for you emotionally, I don't think that that's such a great connection. Or maybe it's one that needs a little bit of work. But that said, if we don't know how to assert without severing the connection, most of us just won't do it. And I'll tell you why. Because our relationships are so important to us. We place a high premium on them. And so people of all genders that I work with have a really hard time telling their partner that this doesn't work for me, that doesn't feel good, that actually reminds me of something bad that happened to me, or I'm getting, disassociated and I need to stop. They just don't know how to do it. That's why I developed something called the Exquisite Partnership Formula, and it's specifically for asserting a very firm no, a very firm boundary in the context of a connection that you want to foster deep heart connection and intimacy, and you want to not interrupt the connection. So I don't know that I've got time to illustrate that today. I don't think I do, but I do want to invite you to reach out to me and also go over to my website, theshamefreezone.com. You can go to shamefreezone.com/subscribe, and you're going to find the Exquisite Partnership Formula ebook there, as well as 3 of my top rated podcasts about sex. The point that I'm really trying to make here, and one of the things I hope that lands well for you, is that nobody taught you how to have this conversation. It wasn't covered in school or college. I've read a lot of self-help books, not really out there either. How do we have a conversation in the middle of sex, in the throes of passion, when everything's going? How do we have that conversation when our triggers get pushed and we're blindsided? I can't tell you how many times I've been blindsided by my own triggers. I have to take responsibility for those. I don't foist it on my partner and say, hey, you triggered me. I go, hey, I'm triggered and I got to stop right now. I got to tell you something. Because of how I have learned to keep the connection alive and healthy, even while I am disengaging from sex, a lot of times we'll spend an hour processing feelings and emotions, and we just go right back to making love. And what happens on the other side of that is, well, it defies words, quite frankly. It's so ascendant, so beautiful. I really want to invite you to experience a sexuality that is so authentic and so connected to the gnarly feelings that the ecstatic ascended feelings will blow your mind.
That is a really great wrap up, Veronica. And I do want to highlight that I know that there are times when people find it very difficult and they feel hopeless and helpless and it gets dark. But if you give up on you, then there wouldn't be light. Don't give up on you. Seek the help and honor your needs. Because realistically speaking, if you don't, what are we even doing here? You know, you deserve it. You need to see yourself as worthy of pleasure, of love, of acceptance, of being held when it's difficult, of being let go when you need the space. But you need to accept that you're worthy and seek the support. And I know that there is no way anything can be compared. I have my own traumas, they're not related to sexuality. And I find it difficult to, even as a psychologist, to sit and see how big the problems are and how much work I need to put in myself to figure it out psychologically and emotionally and socially and bodily. It's huge. I I hold a lot in my body, and on the surface I'm cold, I'm executing, I'm this. People wouldn't think that I have any emotion about any stressful situation or something, but I hold a lot in my body. And it's still a learning process for me to see that all that stress and all that negativity I pour back into my body, and it's acidic, it's killing me. And as Veronica said, we need to let it out. Let it out through touch, let it out through motion, let it out through breath, let it out to connecting with people, therapists, partners, community that understands. And it's a lot of work, but we freaking deserve it. We deserve to be happy. We deserve to be healthy. We deserve to feel pleasure. And as someone who's doing a lot of work on myself, even just physically, be it osteopaths and special apps for improving my eating habits and this and this and this. And if I let it, you'll be like, whoa, how do you even? Well, I make me a priority, and that's why you need to make you a priority. Am I spending on all these things? Yes, how I am, but why? Because I deserve it. Because if I cannot show up healthy, and if I cannot work on that health to be maintained, to be improved, etc., then I'm hurting other people, people around me who have done me no wrong. So I'm working on myself, for myself and for others. And I encourage you to do the same with the help of others and the help of anything in sight that is strong enough to hold you when you need it.
Now, Leah, I want to say one little postscript about trauma. We often think that it's about us and what happened to us, and that is true. But there's a field of study called epigenetics that has now proven scientifically that trauma from a previous generation can go out 7 generations. So sometimes when you're unpacking a traumatic event, it may feel so crushing and so overwhelming because you're also pulling out the trauma that's in your DNA from the people who came before you. In my case, I come from both sides of the family are sexual assault survivors. We've got incest really bad on both sides of the family. But some families have slavery, some families have the Holocaust, some families have war, murder. Whatever has happened in the people that came before you is also coming through you. If you know that that is a sacred process you're doing, not just for you, but for the generations to come next, maybe it will help you find the courage to do it and cut yourself some slack. Don't be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I not over this yet? You're doing something really good for all of us.
Wow, and on that note, someone left us a comment.
Cool.
Someone says, thank you, Veronica, very lovely conclusion and insight. Oh, I need to expand this. at the end, especially with recommending stopping sex to speak about what is happening in the moment. Thank you both for holding the space. Thank you for being here and engage with us. You know, Veronica has a mailing list. I do as well. If you are interested, especially in Veronica's work, go follow. Engage with whatever she's doing. If she speaks in a way that feels relatable, and if you can connect, that's what I said. That's why I said this earlier. If you cannot connect to the person, just pick your purse and go. Find someone you can trust. And if you're connecting with Veronica right now and you see that she's the type of person that you want to talk to, go for it 100%. And um, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And I don't even know what to say. I have nothing of mine to advertise that would necessarily be specific to trauma. But if people are interested about my previous content, I've spoken to other professionals just like Veronica in formats of webinars, and they're all available on my Knowledge Hub. So I will give you the link to that. Veronica, if you want to give the link to your book that you were recommending to people, that would be great if you put it in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sharing the link, the direct link to my Knowledge Hub. So if people want to log in and explore their podcasts there that I've participated and been on, that may be useful and helpful, webinars, insights, articles, you can log in for free. It's completely free to register and log in. So take it, do whatever you need to do with it, and I thank you guys for your time today, and Veronica for doing this with me. It was so precious.
Thank you, Leah. And I just want to applaud your courage for hosting an event like this. I know it's a little scary and edgy, and I'm just really grateful to you.
Absolutely, always. Thank you, folks. Have a good day or night, wherever on the planet you're finding yourself in on it right now. And stay in touch. Don't lose connection with us. Thank you.